Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Columbus, Ohio, it's time for Columbus Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Columbus Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us Lance Tyson with the Tyson Group. Welcome, Lance.
I appreciate. Thanks for having me on.
Well, before we get too far into things, tell us about the Tyson Group. How are you serving folks?
Yeah, so the Tyson Group, we work with sales leaders and their teams to help them compete in kind of a complex world, right? And the world's gotten a heck of a lot more complex since March. And we work from sports and entertainment teams to manufacturing organizations. So we run the gamut. And
then what type of sales are they typically doing?
Yeah, so a lot of time it's it's an organization that's struggling with their talent and trying to get a result. So it could be a complex sale. We're working with an organization in Dayton called Vandalia Rentals, and one of the things we work with them on is really connecting with their clients, which are in the contracting business, all the way to the Columbus Blue Jackets, who their people might be selling partnership deals. So it's really a complex sale, designing a sales process specifically for them and then developing the skill.
So then it's primarily business to business?
Yeah, for the most part, it is.
So now walk me through what an engagement looks like. So I would imagine the pain they're having is they're not selling enough. Is that accurate? They're frustrated?
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, small to mid-sized businesses, and, we've even worked with the Columbus Chamber with their process. A lot of times decision makers feel, number one, a lot of their salespeople don't sell as well as they did if they're an entrepreneur. On the other side, an executive many times kind of thinks that, a really good salesperson is so hard to find that they don't really want to overpress some of the people that they have because salespeople are hard to find. We actually believe salespeople are not born. We believe they're built at some level, and you acquire those skills over time through certain process and things like that. So one of the first things we'll do is we'll assess the current sales team and kind of get a sales DNA, look at the skill sets that drive success, and then at the same time look at their sales process and say what's needed. So for instance, we recently worked with an organization, and based off of our homework and the assessment when we ran, is their sales team wasn't really good at negotiation, and in their sales process the client started to bargain way early, and the company suffered from price integrity issues with the salespeople. The salespeople leave a lot of dollars on the table. So we started to look at we got to come up with a very formal negotiation process that is indicative to how you guys sell, because the skill set is not that great. So where you don't have skill set, you gotta forge a process that will help that.
So then if your process is strong enough, that's going to kind of make up for a less than rock star salesperson?
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. A predictable process yields a predictable result, right? It's not going to, at some level, you got the talent you have, and a lot of us can't afford just to go out and find new salespeople. So we have to come up with a process where skill set's not going to match. It's going to get you better odds. Is it a silver bullet? No, not at all. Nothing is. But odds wise, it does give you a little bit better play.
And then what are some of the kind of, qualities that a solid sales process can cover for a less than stellar salesperson?
Well, I mean, number one, for instance, right now, I have a book that's coming out in March on prospecting. And right now, if you did a Google search on how many times, or an Uber search on how many times the word prospecting is looked up, it's 100,000 times a month on Google, right? A lot of organizations are struggling with that right now because they're trying to get in front of buyers. The landscape is more competitive for the most part. Price objections are there. So one of the things that you could cover for skill is having the right cadence. Right now, all of our research partners tell us it's somewhere between 6 to 8 touches pre-pandemic to get in touch with or connect with a buyer. Right now, everything's shown us 9 to 15 touches. So you could come up with a cadence that addresses the fact where you may have some folks that aren't as skilled, but you can get it with activity. It's almost like this formula. If wherever you lack in skill, so it's activity multiplied by selling skills gets your result. So at some level, you could make up with that with the cadence.
So how does automation play into this? Because there's so many sales automation tools available now to people.
Somebody told me I got a call from a marketing automation company recently, and the salesperson, they were out of Silicon Valley, and they were I think it's one of the Salesforce companies, and the salesperson did a great job. They read one of my blogs. They sent me an email, commented on the blog. They connected with me on LinkedIn. They really personalized it. And so after a time, I said, you know what, I'll give this person some time off my calendar. She asked for an appointment, so I gave it to her. And
so she wore you down. She did. But I also appreciate a good sales approach. That's probably, you got to reward that. There's no harm in talking to a good salesperson. There's nothing bad from that.
Bottom line is you respected a shark, respect a shark, right? So I listened to her, and then she opened up and she goes, Lance, I just want to let you know that prospecting's dead and cold calling's dead. And so I let her go for a few minutes, and I said, well, tell me more. And she started to cite all these sources and all these statistics. And I said, don't you think it's in your best interest to say that, though? And it was Perdito, I think was the name of the company. And she goes, it's a Salesforce company. And she said, well, it really is. And she cited some more stats. I said, but you cold called me. And she kind of stopped and she paused. She goes, well, we've also used some of this. I go, no. But you cold called me. I said, you literally dialed the phone 3 times, whether you pushed a button in your CRM or not. And a lot of your messages were customized. That didn't come out of your marketing automation. I said, so I think a lot of times you're hearing from people that should be saying it, that cold calling and prospecting is dead. At the same time, you look up the most searched word on Google right now for sales. Is that boasted out there because of the marketing automation companies? I think so. Do we use marketing automation? Tyson Group? Heck yeah, we use HubSpot. We're happy with it. It's great for inbound. It's great for outbound. Do we automate some of it? Yeah, but still, our salespeople are following up on hot leads and things like that.
Right. So it has to be a combination. I mean, it's silly not to leverage technology. I mean, it can save you so much time. That's just absurd to, purposely not use a tool.
Right. And as long as you use it well and you know what you're using it for also. But I have yet to really see the reduction of a salesperson involved in either following up with a lead. I've yet to really see somebody, in most more complex sales, that salesperson's integral in driving an appointment or driving a conversation to ultimately drive a sale.
Right. And it has to, I believe, be kind of a human to human interaction. It's hard to just kind of plug and play a 10 cadence automated conversation that may or may not be pertaining to this individual and eventually get them to buy something. That's a difficult road to hoe.
And there's a lot of confusion, right? So just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. You get a lot of information. There's a ton out there. There's a lot of competitors. Right now, a lot of buyers do look at that human to human connection and want somebody to convince them to buy. I just recently picked up a car for my youngest son. He had an older car. It was breaking down a lot. So I went to a Jeep dealership here in Columbus. There's plenty of research on Jeeps. At the end of the day, I still needed a salesperson. I just didn't show up and plug it in. I know there's some concepts like that, but at the end of the day, they still had a sales floor that was busy. They had probably 10 salespeople there.
Right. So now when you're working with your customers, you mentioned the variety of customers or clients that you're working with. Some of them, when it's kind of an entrepreneurial driven entity, you have, like you said, that maybe the founder who maybe enjoys and gets some emotional satisfaction from that heroic sale, that they're the ones that everybody's got to talk to them because they know the most. and you're building a system for that person. Is it the same kind of system when it's a big enterprise company that is more, it's more corporate-y, where they don't have maybe that ego that the entrepreneur has, but they still need the systems?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times when we're going into a large organization, there are things that they do pretty well, right? So they how they manage pipeline and things like that, and they have a process. So many times they're struggling inside a new marketplace, a new vertical, a new product. The entrepreneur a lot of times struggles with salespeople because they don't sell like he or she does, right? And it's usually because the entrepreneur is the best salesperson because they have so much passion about the product and they can't understand why somebody wouldn't be as excited. So you have to kind of dull it down and work on process. They usually lack process. The more corporate environment, you're usually honing in and zeroing on skill. And it's not these big quantum leaps of growth you're going to get. You get reductions in the sales process. That's usually a major KPI we go for, is like, how can we reduce the amount of time it takes a sale? How can we reduce how many meetings there are? Like, we have Topgolf is one of our bigger clients, and there's Topgolf in Columbus and most major cities, and we work with their partnership group and their hospitality group. One of the things this afternoon we're working on is, instead of it being 4 meetings, how do we get that 4th meeting off the calendar and really accomplish some of the things in meeting 2 or 3 that need to be accomplished? And that's usually where a salesperson's struggling with an objection or negotiation, or they're following up on a follow-up, nothing's solid, and they get the buyer's punting down the road. So that's usually the biggest differential.
And is that kind of one of those signals to you as an expert in what you do? If there's so many meetings, all you're doing is kind of setting yourself up for points of failure. So you try to kind of eliminate some of those meetings if possible?
Well, there's 2 things there, right? So first off, the definition of it, I don't know how much of an expert I am, but I was told one time the definition of an expert is somebody that lives 25 miles outside your hometown, doesn't know any more than you, but just says it in a different way. So if that makes me an expert, I guess, right? I would say that the other thing is, as salespeople have a tendency, it's like when you buy anything, like if you go out and get the new iPhone, right? You have another iPhone, is it completely broken? No, but you convince yourself, it's called contribution bias, of why you need something new, why you need that new cell phone, why you need that new computer, why you need that new car. And salespeople have a tendency to look at contributing factors that confirm their biases. And so a lot of times they don't like to bring up reasons why the buyer wouldn't buy, or things that could cause the buyer to think differently. So they don't push on things that a person doesn't like, or some of the reasons they wouldn't buy, and they try to play it. It's like squeezing toothpaste out of an old toothpaste tube. You squeeze it from the back, and you just hope you don't get any resistance until you squeeze it all out. So they wait it out, as opposed to applying some pressure naturally in the process, because most people are going to have they're going to have as many reasons not to do something as reasons to do something. And salespeople sometimes don't want to hear that, because they know how hard it was to get the meeting. They know how hard it was to get the sale. They know how long their sales are. It's, they prefer the artificial harmony versus anything else.
So
that's usually a challenge.
But so your recommendation is to create some friction, is to bring up maybe some of the attributes of your competitor, and as conversations of points of differentiation?
Well, it'd be something like this, right? So if I said to you, so say I was selling you payroll service, right? And I said to you, so what do you think? And you go, what are your thoughts moving forward? And you say, Lance, I think the presentation was great. I really think you guys bring some things to the table. We're going to need to think about it, and we've got to check with a few people. So a typical salesperson go, oh, that's awesome, because they're hearing great. They're hearing it was a great presentation, as opposed to saying, well, as you're thinking about, there's obviously some things you may have some concerns with or questions. What are they? A lot of salespeople don't like to do that. They'd rather play it out the other side, and that elongates the sales process.
Now, what about kind of attacking other, by name, maybe the big player in the industry, or how they do things, or, like directly bringing that up?
Well, if you know that they're playing ball, if they're actually a competitor in the space. I mean, I've had salespeople sometimes do that and not know whether they were playing inside that account. And it came as a pretty good recommendation to bring that in. Right. So I would say on the front end, what we teach is kind of finding out how an organization buys, what their budget process is. And remember, budget is not only a number, it's actually how they make decisions in a time frame. And finding out who else they're talking to, and then inserting the competition that way. We're pretty big on zeroing, aim small, miss small. So it's more honing in the target to what is known as opposed to bringing in and playing off what somebody's saying. So if you had some known factors where the big competitor, if I worked for a small payroll company in town here and I was going up against ADP, I would bring ADP up at some level. Hey, do you use Paychex, ADP, or do you guys do it on your own? I wouldn't already know that before I bring up any competition.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned that sales people can be trained. They're not born, right? That was something you mentioned earlier.
Yep, it's true.
Now, what are some skills or some things that a young person who maybe hadn't considered themselves interested in sales or hadn't considered a sales career, but because of the circumstance nowadays, maybe sales is the right path for them? What are some things that young person should be maybe reading, learning, or skills they should be acquiring in order to be an effective salesperson?
Well, I think number one, if you look at some stats, I've heard anywhere from Daniel Pink say that 4.9 out of every 9 Americans to almost 7 out of every 9 Americans are involved in some kind of business development. I think that's what some younger folks have to come to grips with. And sales is not a dirty word. It is a 4-letter word. Sale is a 4-letter word, but it's not a dirty word. And in realizing that one of the reasons you'd want to get into that field is because salespeople people that bring money to the table or that bring accounts or revenue to the table typically advance in an organization pretty quick, as much so as somebody in high finance. So I think that is because you literally can demonstrate and show what you can execute on, right? So if you're looking at, one of the first things I'm going to suggest, and I come out of this organization for years. I owned several Dale Carnegie training operations, and that's the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'd 100% suggest they read that book. Two, maybe read my book, Selling's an Away Game. It's a good introduction to it. But I think they got to come to grips with knowing that career path is probably the biggest thing, where knowing that sales is going to probably advance your career pretty quickly if you can perform. So that's what I'd come to grips with. I've suggested to my sons and their friends, why get in sales?
Now, do you find that the stigma of a salesperson is getting better or staying the same or getting worse? What's your take on how salespeople are being perceived in the marketplace, from the layperson?
So I've been public speaking since 1995, and I've promised myself there's one question I would ask most groups when I talk, especially a new group. The question is usually, when you think of a salesperson, who do you think of? And people say car. And then what kind of car is the next question? They're like used car. So my point is I think there is a stigma on salespeople for some reason. I don't know what it is. And I'm not even saying car salespeople are bad salespeople. I just think the reference point there is most of us buy cars. I think there is a stigma on salespeople, just because there's so many really bad ones. Nobody wants to feel they're being sold. People want to buy. And I think that's the difference, right? And so when you see a bad one, you certainly know it, right? So I think, is it changing? Maybe. I think the only there's a lot of universities now that offer sales programs or degrees in that, just on marketing and sales too. So is it changing? Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Now, for you, when you're going out to sell your services, what's your sales process look like? How do you get in front of those folks? Is it through your thought leadership, like you mentioned your book? I know you blog a lot. And you speak a lot. Is that your primary tool that you do to get in front of the right people for you?
Well, I mean, we have a pretty strong sales team at Tyson Group, and we eat our own dog food. We practice what we preach. So some of the things that we talked about, my sales team is going after sales qualified leads that come in from blog, website, SEO. They also do high value targeting where they'll go after companies that meet our profile. 4 out of 5 of our clients actually recommend us. That's about 43% higher than people in our industry. So that's a big part of what we do. You know, we're usually leveraging that hot introduction, and that's a big part of our, of kind of how we handle things.
And then the ideal customer is that B2B company with a complex sale that may be frustrated with the trajectory of their sales.
Yeah, I would say also probably another big piece is most of our clients believe they suffer from the disease of uniqueness. Their market, it's different. They have their own set of challenges inside their company. So if you have 5 to 10 salespeople or 100 salespeople, either we come in and consult and evaluate that talent and look at the sales process, or fully go out and train and coach after we do some of that front end work. So that is, I wouldn't say necessarily always complex, because I think sometimes that's in the eyes of the beholder.
And then, so it's folks that have like more than 10, 20 salespeople?
I mean, we've worked with smaller groups, but ideal is probably 10, 15 on the lower side. You know, I mentioned Top Golf earlier. They have almost 300 salespeople. So, we work with Eli Lilly and they have thousands of salespeople on some things we work with them on. So we run the gamut. Although when we engage, though, we do a pretty deep dive. We're working, like I said, with the sales leaders and the salespeople, because when you lift one end of that pen, the other end of the pen moves. So.
And then how long does it take typically for them to get kind of noticeable results?
You know, it really depends what part of the process. Like, for instance, when we're going in assessing a team and we go over their assessment results, we start right away and just kind of coaching them, and they're they can make adjustments in the moment. It just really depends how long the engagement is. Right to the fact, when we do an assessment, we're giving feedback on how to interview folks if they are hiring, right into but most of the results is when we engage in the training portion of what we do, and we start working with the salespeople on deals and how they approach things. They start seeing results immediately as they apply them. But on the same point, though, a lot of these organizations are only as strong as their sales leaders too. You know, what we're not great with is organizations that look at training as an event as opposed to a process, right? And we trained our people, they check it off the list. We drive clients crazy who look at that. So when we I guess somebody said to me one time, we're not in the education business, we're in the training business. We're in the business of getting people not to know something different, but to do something different. So
right, because you can put how we approach. You could put the best roadmap in place, and they can untrain them as fast as you're training them.
I mean, we had a client last year that when we went back to a review, we started talking about some of the adjustments that we suggested. And he goes, well, we didn't have the buyer set or the customer, so we didn't have a chance to apply that, or we didn't necessarily agree with that. I go, well, that's kind of why you're not seeing the result. I mean, he goes, well, it felt uncomfortable. I said, well, I mean, I lift 3 or 4 times a week. I goblet squat. That's not very comfortable, but I can tell you my thighs are pretty strong. Right. So what's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not right.
Right. And it's not working. It could be working perfectly.
Exactly.
Well, Lance, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. If somebody wants to learn more, get a hold of your book, or have a conversation with you or somebody on your team, what's the website?
Yeah, if you can go to www.tysongroup.com, you can follow me at Lance Tyson on Twitter or connect with me on LinkedIn. And I have 2 books out there. You can go on Amazon. We have a new book we put out in September called Igniting Sales EQ. It's about sales mindset. And that's a bestseller. And then we have another bestseller called Selling is an Away Game. And they're both available on Amazon and other bookstores.
Good stuff. Well, thank you again for sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
I appreciate your time.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Columbus Business Radio.